So I find it interesting. I've examined these certain themes while playing games, and I've arrived to certain questions. Why do so many protagonists awaken with amnesia, or awaken with not being able to remember certain things? Why are games filled with fragmented stories and lore and storytelling? Why do we collect journal pages, echoes, remnants of a world that used to be? Why are video games obsessed with memory? So in nature, memory is fragmented, it's selective, it's subjective, it's based on your own experiences. Conversely, video games are more so non-linear. They can be explorative, they can be player driven, and you get an interesting combination when you combine these two factors and the two natures of these different things, and that creates an overlap that makes memory the perfect narrative tool when you're creating video games. You could take a game like Final Fantasy VII, where you have distorted memory and it occurs sort of as a plot twist. You can have games like Nier Automata, where identity is tied to data and repetition. And then you can have games like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, where Link, his memories are restored when you meet certain characters or you progress the story and you arrive at certain locations. The truth of the matter is that memory just serves as one of the most potent tools that can be used in order to drive a story forward and to create identity within a game and to make something its own unique iteration. And I think the reason why this is because games don't just tell memory, they stimulate it. Perhaps something could happen in a game that could be something as indicative of your own life. You know, a lot of games incorporate themes of death or themes of loss. Well, who alive today hasn't experienced loss? It's easy to be able to relate to certain things and certain factors when they are much more reflective of the general population as a whole, particularly the people, that fragment of the population who plays video games. Even me in particular, for the story that I'm currently writing for the game I want to eventually make, it incorporates themes of memory loss and of amnesia. And I think I just find it interesting that before even making this video, it didn't even occur to me of how prevalent memory loss and just memory in general is when it comes to developing a game. So in modern video games, the story isn't just handed to you, it's excavated. You discover it, so to speak. It's a sort of lore as archaeology. And this is indicative by things of item descriptions, of environmental clues, and also things like how I mentioned before, there could be remnants of that world. Like in The Last of Us, there are journal pages, you'll find scraps of paper, all sorts of things scattered throughout the world that's been decimated essentially. And you just piece together little by little, okay, this happened here, this happened there, and then you can put the two things together and come to your own conclusions about how the game may progress or what actually happened. And then you arrive and you see that that did actually happen, or conversely, maybe it didn't happen. But what it does is it allows the player to come to their own conclusions as to what happened and transpired in that game. And this is actually a philosophy that is heavily associated with Miyazaki. That's why you see this reflective in Souls games, because it allows players to sort of fill in the blanks. You give them a macro environment, you give them a world, they discover little snippets, bits and pieces here and there, they can come to assume, okay, so Millennia's armor says this, but the braid of Mikola says this. Maybe the conclusion is this. So it just allows you to fill in the blanks as the person who is playing the game. You aren't watching history. Well, in terms of Elden Ring, you kind of are, because you're dropped into the world after the shattering. But you're not, in most cases, you're not watching history. You're uncovering it. As I said, it's lore as archaeology. You're discovering what happened as you go along. The memory is the gameplay. Now, there are a lot of protagonists who have amnesia. And I think this is because it aligns the player knowledge with the character knowledge. You and the character discover the world simultaneously. The character is trying to figure out what did they essentially forget. They combine that with the things they discover, and you as the player, you're on the outside looking in. So you're like, okay, I can see that this player had this protagonist that I'm controlling. I can see that they have amnesia. What can I take from the things that are happening in the game and combine with the things that I don't know, and what conclusion can I come to? And I think that removes a sort of exposition and storytelling awkwardness as you're sitting there trying to navigate the story, because the fact that they lost their memory, it returns a sense of newness and freshness to you, because you yourself also do not know what's going on, the same just as the protagonist you're controlling in the game. An example of this could be games like Disco Elysium, Planescape, Torment, stuff like that. The amnesia isn't laziness, it's synchronization. It allows the two things, both you and the player you're controlling, to become one and the same, so to speak, and you both learn the world as you progress the game together. Now let's peel the layer back. Let's go to a deeper layer. Let's combine the concepts of memory with identity. And this can be examined and analyzed by asking yourself what games constantly ask you, whether directly or indirectly. And games have the tendency to ask you, are you who you remember being? Are you defined by your past or by your actions right now? And in a way, this is a form of interactive media, because your identity isn't static. It's constantly changing, and you're constantly trying to figure out who you are and discern your own development in real time. It's a sort of chosen identity, performed, and it's earned. Memory becomes a mechanic within the game, and it's not just something that is left on the outside for you to discard. It's you questioning your own selfhood and discovery of who you are, who you used to be, and who you could become. Now, this may sound cliche or maybe unoriginal, but personally speaking, I do think that the use of amnesia as a mechanic and an element in a video game is something that's very powerful, is very potent, something that could be used as a great tool in terms of narrative progression, because in a way, all it is a manifestation of how a lot of us already feel. It's amazing how little we know about ourselves when we ask ourselves questions, or when people ask us questions and we can't really answer them. Controlling a video game character who also has amnesia or memory loss is kind of reflective of us, because in ways, do we all even fully know what we're doing or who we are, or the things about us that lie deep within? Because we have a tendency to push things down. Not everyone, but a lot of people have a tendency to push things down or to shy away from certain insecurities or fears or things that they may have that comprise their being. So I think it's such a great tool because it's fragmented, and we're fragmented. We're human beings. That's why the saying exists, I'm only human, because we are definitions, we are embodiments of being imperfect. So I think that amnesia is also a signifier of imperfection, and that's probably why it's such a great use in a video game. Maybe that's why collecting lore is so satisfying in the game. You get to read about the different things that happen, or the different tools and the different weapons and all these things, because in a way it's kind of like you're piecing together yourself as well. As I said earlier in the video a couple times, when you find a journal entry, it's kind of like discovering the truth. And it's sort of these collectibles, they can serve as a cognitive reward. It's like it's a benefit to you on a introspective personal level without you having to verbalize or say anything. It triggers curiosity, a loop of curiosity, so to speak, because the more you discover, the more you want to know, and the more you want to find out what happened. And that happens on a loop. It happens repeatedly. It also rewards your exploration. That's why you'll play games like The Last of Us, games like Elden Ring, and the more you discover in these vast worlds, the more questions will arise, because you're discovering and you're learning more. It gives the illusion of control over narrative. And I think these memory fragments are kind of like micro victories in the game. When you aren't fighting a boss, well, at least I can discover what's happening in the story and I can understand this more. That kind of mindset. I think forgetting something is scarier than death, to be honest with you. And many games treat memory loss as tragic, but I would argue to lose your memory is to lose identity. To lose history is to lose meaning. If you don't know things that transpired, well, how can you avoid things that may come if you don't have that knowledge from before? Or how can you mitigate the damage from things to come when you don't have that knowledge to fall back on and to serve as that foundation? I think that's why there have been destroyed civilizations in games, and that feels so heavy, because they're forgotten. They're not necessarily dead. They're not necessarily dead, but they're dead and they're forgotten, which is something that hits different, so to speak, because you're not just gone, but you're gone and no one even cares. And forgetting, when something is forgotten, those things feel erased, completely gone. No trace, no remnant of it at all. Maybe games aren't obsessed with memory, but maybe they are. And I think that's because memory is probably where we derive meaning from. That's how we construct it, which is why memory is such a powerful tool when you make a game. And maybe fragmented storytelling mirrors fragmented lives, as I alluded to earlier. We all are still piecing things together and trying to figure things out as we go. Maybe we don't just play to win, maybe we play to remember. Video games don't just stimulate action, they stimulate the reconstruction of our identities. And maybe that's why we feel so personal. Maybe that's why these games feel so personal. I'm Harlem. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.